Welcome to the K in Clarity podcast. I'm the host, Mezue. During this episode, we're joined by Brandon Wade, Vice President and co-leader of the Musculoskeletal practice and digital health and health IT practice at Health Advances. Brandon Wade has been instrumental in shaping transformative strategies for digital health, health IT, biopharma, and medtech organizations, driving innovation at the intersection of technology and healthcare delivery. With more than a decade of strategy consulting experience and over 150 completed engagements, Wade has worked with clients ranging from early-stage digital startups to the largest biopharmaceutical and private equity companies in the world, and has played a key role in advancing innovative, commercial, and growth strategies tailored to the evolving healthcare marketplace. His thought leadership and work across clinical, corporate, franchise, and product strategy have positioned him as a strategic voice in the digital health transformation of healthcare, enabling stakeholders to accelerate value-based care, harness enabling technologies like robotics and AI, and navigate the complexities of integrating digital and traditional models of care delivery. In this conversation, we discuss his journey into healthcare consulting and the rewards and challenges of the field. He reflects on his decision to pursue consulting over medicine, the importance of innovation in healthcare, and the evolving landscape of patient care. Brandon emphasizes the need for strategic thinking and economic considerations in healthcare, as well as the impact of administrative burdens on physicians. He also highlights the role of AI in transforming healthcare and offers advice for future leaders in the industry. If this is your first time tuning in, here's the gist. The healthcare industry is buzzing with innovations, but there's a lot of noise and misconceptions out there. That's where we come in. Because of my experience in the healthcare ecosystem, I've gained a unique vantage point into the industry's inner workings. We're bringing you the conversations that typically happen behind boardrooms and strategy sessions, the real challenges, innovative solutions, and game-changing insights that are reshaping healthcare as we know it. On this podcast, we're bringing you face-to-face with the industry-leading healthcare founders, executives, and innovators. We're talking about the nitty-gritty of building and scaling healthcare companies, the hurdles they've overcome, and the strategies that have led to their success. More importantly, we dive into the personal challenges that come with trying to change a system as complex as U.S. healthcare. So whether you're a healthcare entrepreneur, a medical professional, or just someone passionate about the future of healthcare, this podcast is your backstage pass to the minds shaping the industry. Now, let's have Brandon tell us a little bit about themselves. Welcome, Brandon, to the K in Clarity podcast. For the people listening, can you give a brief overview of who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation. My name is Brandon Wade. I'm a vice president at Health Advances. Health Advances is a strategy consulting firm solely focused on the healthcare industry. The firm's been around for a little over 30 years now. It was two Bain partners who were married then and really wanted to dedicate their time specifically to healthcare because it is a beast to understand. At typical consulting firms where one week you're doing automotive, the next aerospace, the next healthcare, you really couldn't spend the amount of time and build the depth that you need to provide good strategy within healthcare. So I joined the firm almost 13 years ago now. This is quite literally my first job coming out of undergrad. I never thought I would be here this long, but sure enough, I'm now here 13 years. So
Beautiful. So firstly, we usually like to do an icebreaker here, and I know from our conversation, you're an avid fan of learning. So my question for you is, if you could shadow or learn from any, health professional, past or present, or any type of specialty, who would it be and why, and what do you think you'd really take from them?
Yeah, great question. So if I had a day, I would absolutely shadow a trauma doc or someone doing a very complicated organ transplant because you're going to be in the OR for the entire day, right? That is a long, complicated procedure with trauma. You have no idea what you're going to get. I think just seeing someone excel in their profession and be calm and reasonable and thoughtful and provide good guidance throughout a chaotic procedure like that would be, I think, really inspiring. You would certainly get a crash course into so many different types of treatment. I mean, depending on the trauma that a patient might have, you could have all different types of surgeons in the room too. So being a fly on the wall for a trauma procedure, I think would be fascinating, right? You'd get to see and learn so much, not just clinically, but also again those people who are in the room and keeping calm under pressure. I mean, that's something that you'd love to see how they operate and how they work with their staff and ultimately deliver the best care for the patient. Here, I would have said Steve Irwin, but it's not possible.
Now, I know biology was one of your favorite subjects growing up, and you had an interest in becoming a marine biologist before really shifting into healthcare. What about your early career and your family background really helped you shift into this path that you're on now? I think your early experience is something that I'd love to hear and for the audience to hear.
Yeah. I'm not the classic example of having doctors in my family. My dad was an architect. My mom was a physical therapist for patients with cystic fibrosis. So I did have some of the kind of the patient care within the household, but neither of my parents were doctors specifically. But that absolutely started the interest. I don't think my mom has ever said it, but I know that she would have loved to be a doctor. Seeing her passionate about her patients certainly started that. A little bit of a tangent. Uh, During COVID, my mom came out of retirement to volunteer in an ER. And my mom was 65 at the time, right? Big questions on whether you want to expose yourself to COVID, especially at that age. So that just shows how much she cares about patients and cares about helping others. So, I think that was definitely something that I picked up early on. But it did start with more animals and marine biology, and I actually used to work at a zoo in high school. I did a couple summer jobs at a zoo up in New England. And yeah, again, I feel like that's probably pretty natural for a kid, right? Starting with an interest in animals, and we had so many pets at home, and I thought that was fascinating. And then as I went to college and started to take biology and biochemistry, that's where it started to transition more towards patient care as I was thinking about a career after UVA, where I ended up going.
I know 2 years into your time in health advances, you decided, hey, this is something that potentially could be a long-term fit. What about the place, the environment that you think maybe others could take in their healthcare career, profession, really made it the right fit for you?
Yeah, it's a meaty question. Honestly, I didn't know consulting existed. When I was an undergrad, I was fully pre-med. I was biochemistry and biology. I didn't even have bandwidth to take an economic class, a finance class. I had signed up for one, I think my third year at UVA, and then a biochem class that I needed to graduate ended up opening up, so I had to drop the econ class after a week. So I just had zero exposure to that, and I think probably like many schools, if you're majoring in the sciences, the career opportunities that are thrown at you are very science related, which makes sense, right? You either go to med school, you get your PhD, you work in a lab, maybe you go be a scribe as you're preparing for one of. I was never proactively approached with the idea that, hey, there's actually a world out there where you can apply your, deep scientific knowledge and learn an entire new industry, right? The business behind healthcare. So I actually somewhat got introduced to it through a family friend who had worked at a healthcare consulting firm. So that was the initial idea. And then a lot of my friends in college were in the undergraduate business school, which at the time UVA was ranked #1 in undergraduate business school. So they were clearly finding, lots of success with internships and things like that in New York. So there was a little bit of a bug there that got started in my brain, seeing what they were doing. And at the time, I really wanted to take a gap year. I had worked in a lab. I just felt like I wanted to get a broader experience before jumping into med school. And what an amazing opportunity to learn more about the business side of healthcare. You're leveraging your skills, your clinical skills, but you're also learning completely new concepts, which again, I just never got exposed to undergrad. So that was the initial draw, right? Learn something different before going back to med school. And then I think once I got there, I was just so surprised by how much I enjoyed the work. I mean, consulting is really fast paced, and I was doing, new projects every other month in completely new sectors of healthcare for completely new clients, completely different clinical situations, completely different indications. So it was fascinating, right? Like, when do you get to learn and really dive deeply into that many different areas of healthcare and complex problems, in such a short order? So that absolutely, piqued my interest. I was, full in from the beginning, and just getting so much out of it, which was great at the time, right? This was exactly what I was hoping consulting would be, coming out of undergrad for a gap year or two.
With that spirit, you obviously get to work with tons of people in different perspectives. And so, what has been the most rewarding aspect of that work? And then maybe what's something that, is a little bit frustrating in comparison to maybe your initial expectations before joining consulting?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the reason why I have been here so long is the people. I think I just found a place that really fit my personality. I think we talked about this a little bit before, but at the time, because I didn't know much about consulting, the only connotations I had were that it was competitive, cutthroat, male dominated. These were just perceptions that I had in the back of my head, probably because I didn't know too much about it. Whether or not those are 100% true or not is a different question. But at Health Advances, I found a completely different environment. So it was founded by a husband and wife. They're still husband and wife now. Over 50% of management and staff are women. It's a very collegial environment. I mean, everyone is there to help each other, to learn from each other. As a fresh analyst, you're debating strategy with a partner, right? Like, that's really, really, really fun, and it was so interesting for me. So yeah, of course, like, if you're going to stay at a job for over a decade, the people have to be a huge draw. I really liked how fast paced it was. I mean, again, you are just constantly learning new things, and again, it's not just new clinical areas, but it's new problems, it's new companies that you're working with, it's new client situations, it's different teams that you're working with every other month, right? I think if you go into medicine in part or into industry, you're probably working with more consistent people time in and time out, and you probably, learn how to work with that person, over time, but you're not getting as many opportunities to learn how maybe I need to adapt the way that I work and the way that I think when I'm working with this type of individual versus that type of individual to get the most out of them. So from a content perspective, from a professional development perspective, it was just, again, a crash course, and I just felt like I was constantly learning and constantly growing, which was, hugely important to me when I was starting out my career. And then
Yeah.
the frustrations, I mean, consulting is frustrating, right? Any service industry is really tough because, yeah, I mean, clients have really tough problems that they're trying to answer, and that's why they bring in consultants, right? Like, if it was an easy problem, then you really wouldn't need to hire us. So we are brought in really high stakes situations, tackling high stakes problems, and that can lead to a lot of frustration, right? That are rapid and always rapidly approaching. It feels like that can be difficult. I think you learn really good project management skills, you learn time management skills, and that's something that was a big learning curve for me that I had to get through. I was the stay late in the library and study until 2 a.m. every night, and that's just how it worked for me. But when people are dependent on me to get information to them ASAP because they like to sign off at 6 or 7, I had to shift some things around and really learn. So that's where some of the early frustrations came in, but all things that you can work through.
Mhm. I love that your firm, is built by, a couple that's still ongoing. I think that's something special and, really represents, the union and the type of people they probably are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pairing with that, from your experience prior to the confidence that you had of when we were speaking of, hey, that you could have been a good surgeon. And I think that's something that I love to see. And as well, I also wanted to be a doctor at one point, especially, with my mom's influence, but that wasn't the path that we went on. Right. And additionally, one thing that you mentioned is that sometimes there's maybe a broy or a cocky culture around things. And so how do you think that kind of influenced your path as well in deciding to go down the consulting route?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I'm to be completely honest, like I don't know what the right decision was. If I had went to med school, I probably still wouldn't know what the right decision was. Like, would it have been better to stay in consulting? Who knows, right? That's a little bit just. I do think I would have been a really good surgeon. I mean, I love caring for patients. My dad was an architect, so I grew up building. I build all my own furniture. Like, I love the tactile experience. I feel very confident in doing all of that. Orthopedic surgery was what I wanted to do. I lead our orthopedic surgery practice now at Health Advances, so I've kind of come back to that, which has been really nice. But yeah, I think I would have loved it at the time. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I was getting torn in a lot of different directions. I think if you take a gap year, it does expose you to other things, right? Like you're so narrowly focused on med school in college, and that is a fantastic path that many should go down, continue to do that, absolutely. But it doesn't open you up to just take a step back and, what are other jobs, whether they're in healthcare or not, right? The world is really big, and there's so many jobs out there, so it's hard to it's hard to know that there's other options. And I think when you take a gap year, you somewhat expose yourself to that, right? Like you see some realities about, oh, there's this completely other sector I didn't think about, or there's a completely different way to care for patients while not being a doctor that I didn't think about, right? So I think as I took the gap year, I started to learn, wow, like really like consulting. I really like learning so many different things. Like I really like seeing the direct and immediate impact of the work that I'm doing for clients and then eventually for patients as their products come to market and get used. So I don't know, like I was a little bit daunted about going back to med school and, instead of progressing in a career and making money, now being back in the library and studying, which was always something that I loved. I think I still would have loved that, but it would have been a very big change at that point. I was also at the time right on the precipice of becoming a team leader at Health Advances as I was going through the interview process for med school. And being a team leader was just always something that I wanted to do. I mean, watching my team leaders as I was a team member was inspiring. I mean, they were all just incredibly competent leaders, experts in their areas, and that's something that I really emulated. I grew up playing sports too. I was always team captain. So again, it's just what I love doing. So that was a big draw. And yeah, we as part of our job, we interview surgeons every day and physicians every day, and we learn some of the struggles and some of the frustrations, and those are only increasing as administrative burdens goes up, reimbursement challenges go up, patient demands are increasing as they should, and it's really hard for physicians. I mean, talk about at times a thankless job. Like even though you think being a physician is this like glorified position, and it is, many of the physicians we talk to, it feels like they're in a thankless profession, which should not be the case, obviously. So yeah, like you start to see that it's not as shiny and glimmery as you maybe thought. So I think all of those things played into my decision to ultimately stay. Again, I have no idea if it was the right decision or not. And then just because you mentioned it, the last thing I'll note, yeah, like being an orthopedic surgeon, I mean, those guys and girls are, I mean, they are like really cool and really well respected, right? Like talk about such an awesome profession.
Absolutely.
And you get into this world of orthopedics where I think you are viewed by patients and even other physicians as like being the cowboy, like being the top person in the in a hospital, and you're making money and you have got opportunities to open your own practices and make even more money, and it feels like it would be really easy to get kind of sucked up into that, which is fantastic for many people. Again, I feel like that's an environment that I sometimes just shy away from a little bit. So I don't know if that played into it slightly, or maybe it was just recognizing that I probably wouldn't be able to not get sucked in. So thinking about my own kind of life that I want to have, and maybe being a little bit less caught up at work was something that I was looking for at the time. So yeah, it'd be great to press reset and try that path and then compare the two. A nice A/B test would be good, but unfortunately can't do that yet.
Yeah, life doesn't work that
Yeah.
way. No, that's cool. But I think you've gone on a good road. And I think, there's other professionals, other healthcare professional executives, and leaders that, maybe we've had the same thoughts. And so, people that are still pushing forward in their careers, still wanting to excel, and improve their organizations. People out, especially saying that maybe 15 to 20 year range of being in industry, what would be, your advice to them in, the path that they've been on and wanting to improve their organization, especially with the experiences that you've had? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, from a personal perspective, I think it's really nerve-wracking, changing something that you've been doing for so long. Like, I don't have a great perspective on that, right? Because I've been in this job for a really long time myself. I do love consulting, not on the 20-year-old person or 20 years in industry, but for someone starting out, consulting is a fantastic job just to get, again, this crazy crash course into different areas of healthcare. And it was funny. I actually came in really wanting to be an orthopedic surgeon. Therefore, I wanted to study the orthopedic market. And at the time, there really wasn't much innovation happening there. Like, I was very upset about that because I really wanted to work in ortho. But at the time, and frankly, it still is in part today, big companies beating each other up with sales forces, products that aren't fully differentiated or don't have the data to show that they're differentiated. So I don't know, like it just felt like it wasn't as inspiring to me to work on those projects. So the nice part about consulting is, you don't have to be pigeonholed, right? So we work across medtech, digital, pharma, and diagnostics. So then I branched out. I did more work in pharma where, clearly people are innovating all the time, developing new drugs, and then in digital. So I co-lead our digital practice now as well. And I mean, we all know how crazy the world of digital and now AI is across all industries and of course within healthcare as well. So it was really nice just to experience that different sectors and different types of products that you can work on and different ways that you can impact patient care and delivery of care. And getting back to thinking about companies that we've worked with that have been around for a while, developing products. I think the most fascinating companies that I like to work for are the ones that had this amazing product. They've been growing really, really well, right? It almost sells itself, right? Huge white space, no competition, they're just full green light to go out and sell, and they do really, really well. But then they get to this point where, you start to see that plateau. You start to, all the low-hanging fruit is off the table. And then what do you do, right? And I think many companies get into really tricky situations where they should have thought about this years ago, right? Like they should have invested more time in strategy and thinking about what do we want the company to be, not just next year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Do we have a roadmap? Are we doing what we need to today to make sure we can actually do that in 3 to 5 years once our product starts to taper off in terms of growth. So I really like working with clients in those situations because that's a really tough problem to solve and one that we love.
I know, firsthand you've seen, the challenges clinicians face, when it comes down to reimbursements or administrative burdens. How have those issues really have guided, your perspective on, innovation, strategy, and consulting, and really, finding ways to solve those problems?
Yeah. I mean, I think we believe that innovation can absolutely help with all of those things. It is absolutely a reality for physicians today that, they're doing more and more administrative work. They're spending more and more time documenting kind of what they did, more and more time reviewing data, less and less time with patients, which theoretically is why physicians got into their practice, more and more time fighting with payers for reimbursement so that they can do something on their patient, or they did something on their patient and the payer's not reimbursing for it, so now the hospital is going to have to eat that cost. So it's a lot of time spent not caring for the patient, and that is extremely challenging. I think as industries grow and hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers are their own businesses, they also are trying to grow. So you've got physicians that are also having to deal with that, right? Some physicians are very acutely aware of the finances of a procedure and, I'm delivering the best care for the patient, but if I do things this way, I know that we'll save a little bit of money on the back end, or my patient will be less at risk for coming back into the hospital where we may have to pay some penalty, or we might not get separate reimbursement. But there's other physicians that just want to do great care, and that should be their job, right? But they're getting pressure from their hospital admin, they're getting pressure from the leaders of the hospital that are thinking about the dollars and cents, and it's just really unfortunate that has to be true, right? Like, you would hope that, we can provide the best care for patients in a thoughtful manner, for sure, but just not have to deal with as much headache there. But at the end of the day, a hospital can't deliver any care for patients if they're not, profitable, right? If they're not doing what they need to do, just in terms of good business practice. So yeah, I think that's just really tough for a lot of physicians to deal with, and everyone working in healthcare, right? Like, the nurses deal with it, everyone deals with it. And I think innovation can help. We certainly believe that. We work with, all kinds of digital technologies that are being implemented in the hospital that physicians are using to help, their work streams. We're working with companies that are helping the patient directly in a digital manner to try to streamline delivery of care, effectiveness of care, and cost effectiveness of care. It's really challenging, though. Any type of innovation that is helping to improve workflow and things like that faces a massive learning curve. Right? Like, learning a new platform, getting a new phone, right? Like, switching computer types from Mac to Apple, like, that's hard to do for anyone. You eventually learn it, and it might be much, much, much better in a month or 2 months or 6 months from now. But that learning curve is tricky, right? And motivating people to change their workflow and their practice that they've done for years and years and years is really hard. So I think the people that are trying to innovate there around the delivery of care, it's not just having the tech, but it's being able to, inspire that change and make it as easy for the end user as possible to implement that. Because you can have the best tech in the world, you can have the best product in the world, but if it's not being used the way that you need it to, then it failed, right? Then it's a bad product. So I think that's where innovation can be great, but it is really tricky to roll out in the real world.
Keying in on workflows, as someone that has gone from director level to senior director at Health Advances, how has your workflow changed, especially in solving problems?
Yeah. Like many industries, at some point you're kind of progressing up, or you're not as hands-on with the work. And I think that can be a real challenge for a lot of people, right? Like, you fall in love with your job, you fall in love with the work that you're doing, and then eventually you're transitioning from, doing the work to leading the teams to leading bigger and broader teams where you're kind of more just overseeing things and interacting with the client. And then you're up to the level of VP, where now it's selling. It's talking with clients, it's hearing their problems, it's letting them know what we can and can't do, and hopefully finding project opportunities where we can bring our people in and our data and our resources and really help you get you to where you need to go. But that comes with doing less of the work. I think that's something that I've slowly gotten used to. I think I invest more of my time still into all of my projects because I'm just generally interested in those, and I think it's a better product at the end of the day too. But yeah, that's just the big challenge as anyone moves up. It's something that you have to think about, and how you want to balance your time.
Obviously, you've been in a Health Advance for a long time. So can you maybe share a project that really helped shape your perspective on the industry as you've kind of gone up the ladder, and maybe some things about it, some takeaways that could be, advice to other leaders in the space?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit before, but the projects that I like most are those companies that maybe didn't involve strategy as early on, and we're growing like gangbusters, and now we're in a really tricky spot and understanding where the next avenue of growth is going to come from. The projects are fun because typically they involve big corporate strategy type work, right? You're in there with the client, you're debating strategy, you're facilitating big workshops with them to nail down, what is the vision of the company? What things do we need to invest in to make that come to fruition? What tactics do we need to use to get there? How are we going to involve the different functions within an organization, right? What are our sales organization and sales reps need to be doing? How can marketing support them? What is clinical affairs on the medical team? need to produce from a data perspective to, arm our marketing and sales reps with information to help differentiate us from competition. Market access is a challenge that no one thinks about as early as they should, especially with, reimbursement getting pulled back in many situations. It's really tough to go out there and fight for reimbursement for your solution, even though if it is fantastic and will deliver really good care for patients. The bar is higher today than it's ever been to get, true adoption on market. It's not just, proving yourself clinically, but it's proving yourself clinically, commercially, economically for different stakeholders. So I think those types of projects are just really fun because they're super, super big and broad. A really interesting project that we did actually right before COVID, we were working with a company that had an intravitreal injection into the eye to treat a condition that was essentially a form of progressive blindness. So it was a really impactful drug, and we did their US commercialization strategy. So, what physician types might be delivering this? How are you going to diagnose patients? How can you set up your organization to support all those stakeholders? And then they came to us and said, hey, we want to expand ex-US. We've never done this before. We've never brought a product ex-US. We have no idea what country to go to, what regions to go to, the sequence by which we go to different countries. And we ended up doing an analysis that was staged, but we quite literally looked at every country outside of the US, which was fascinating just to learn the different ways healthcare is delivered in different countries and different regions. And some countries, are delivering fantastic levels of care across their entire populations. Other countries have massive gaps in access to care, be that geographically, be that because of economic reasons. You have countries with completely different markets, right? You have a public market where, reimbursement might be, frankly, really poor, and then you've got private markets for the people that can afford it. That is really sad, but it is a reality for some of those countries. So the interesting thing is that we did this entire project and we essentially identified, countries with, big opportunities where you might be able to get your drug approved and on market rather quickly, and they have good infrastructure to roll that drug out to their population rather quickly as well. This project was right before COVID. So we did this project, we recommended certain countries, and then during COVID, when the vaccine was being rolled out, many of those countries that we had flagged as like, oh, this is one that usually approves things quickly and rolls it out very quickly to people in their country, to patients. And those were the exact countries that popped up when the COVID vaccine was being rolled out. So it was just a very interesting time, obviously, for thousands of reasons, but that was one project that we did where we were like, wow, this is really interesting that like some of the dynamics that we're actually seeing playing out in real life is, things that we predicted. There were a couple surprises, but I thought that one was really, really, really interesting and meaningful. And the company that we worked with is now, doing that in different countries and bringing that therapy to patients that really need it. So really inspiring there too.
Just out of curiosity, what are some common mistakes you see with bigger healthcare organizations, and why do you think that is typically?
Yeah, there's so many competing interests, unfortunately, in the world of healthcare, right? You want to develop innovative therapies, but you have to do it in a cost-effective manner in order to deliver care for patients, in order to develop the next drugs and devices. You do have to generate revenue, right? It's just a reality that, we have to invest in those things. So therefore, we do need to be a successful company from a business perspective to be able to invest in the rollout and overcoming all these challenges that we've talked about operating within the world of healthcare. So it is a challenging market. I think some companies lose sight of how important strategy is. Some companies lose sight of how much other support you will need to provide to patients, to physicians, to different stakeholders, right? Like some people don't focus as much on payers as they need to make sure that not only are physicians able to purchase the product, but that it will be reimbursed. Otherwise, it's not going to be used, ultimately not going to get into the hands of patients. So yeah, I think those are the big ones. I think big companies have other challenges. Many of them are public and somewhat beholden to the market. So they're constantly looking for ways to grow and cut down on costs and things like that. And I think there's some just real push-pulls there within an organization, and certain projects will not get investment because they're not necessarily going to match the growth expectations or the margin expectations of those big companies. And I think that is really unfortunate. If those types of solutions had different backers with different expectations, maybe it could get brought to market. And a lot of those big companies do divest some of those things to other investors as well. So it's not like they're all completely shelved. But yeah, there's just challenges at every level, and they're completely different from a small startup to a mid-sized company to a large company. And again, one nice thing about working in consulting is that you get to work with all of those different stakeholders and see the challenges that they're facing, and they're real challenges. I mean, they are solving real complicated challenges, first and foremost on the clinical side, just doing fantastic work there to bring new solutions to market for patients. But just the idea of bringing something to market and getting it in the hands of physicians and patients is just as big in terms of the amount of the.
In terms of solving problems and challenges, how do you balance analytical rigor with empathy and also understanding patient needs in your consulting work?
Yeah. It is unfortunate that we are another step removed from the patient, just given the work that we do, right? We're not a company developing novel medications or devices for patients. We're not a physician delivering that care. We are helping companies bring products to physicians and patients. So I think that is unfortunate. I think there are some projects where you may feel even more removed, which is unfortunate. But we also do a lot of work where we interview patients, where we do surveys with patients, where we're interacting with patients, and those bring it all home very quickly, which is fantastic. When I look back on my 13 years, some of the projects that I was most satisfied with were those that had patient components. So the one that I was talking about before about expanding ex-US, we actually did patient interviews on that one, which was amazing. I've done workshops with patients where we've tested new auto injectors with them, patients with multiple sclerosis where you do have dexterity challenges. So kind of seeing them work with the auto injector, was interesting. And then probably the one that I always think about and was one of my favorite projects was with patients with HIV and AIDS. And at the time, we've kind of touched it from multiple different angles, but thinking about longer acting medication, which certainly would be a huge benefit for patients where adherence to medication is really challenging for a number of different reasons. And one of those indications where with proper adherence, there have been proof points that you can even cure HIV, which is amazing, right? Talk about work done by pharmaceutical companies to develop life-changing, life-saving medication, and then it runs into roadblocks where the only problem is access to medication and adherence to medication. So talking with patients, talking about their challenges in getting medication, and taking 3 buses to get to the clinic to get the bottle of pills, and not knowing if they'll be able to do that the next month. Incredibly sad, but really inspiring for our work and trying to help these companies that work in the HIV space to make better options for their patients. So I think that's where you bring it home, but yeah, it is tough, right? When you get into the business side of healthcare, it's challenging. I always take a step back and look at it. The work that we're doing to help companies grow, to invest in the right products. Ultimately, we are helping them get that product in more physicians' hands, which ultimately gets into more patients. So delivering the care. And if you believe that the products you're working on are truly impacting patients, providing them options that they didn't have before, or providing options that are better than the ones currently existing, you have to believe in that, right? Like you have to believe that all this work that we're doing, which sometimes can feel like dollars and cents, ultimately is leading to more patients getting access to these fantastic medications.
Talking about, the business side, I know your experience in commercialization and market access has been profound. What would you say is maybe the biggest hurdles that you've seen when it comes down to, diagnostics, pharma, or, med tech innovation?
Yeah, we have seen a complete shift in new innovations, frankly. We used to live in a world where investment into new innovation, be it a diagnostic, be it a new drug, be it a device, really happened once you could prove out the clinical side of things, right? When you're getting early data proving that your drug, your device, or your diagnostic is going to lead to some great benefit. I think that's where we would see we would see investment. We would see investment from private equity, from strategics, from VCs, from whoever. And the world is completely different now, where we used to just have to de-risk the clinical side. Now investors are wanting to see commercial success before actually jumping in and investing. And I think that's just a very different world for a lot of these companies that, start out with very strong clinical acumen, right? They're developing the drug, they're running it through clinical trials. They may have brought this from, an academic center or from a university as, a research project, and now they're looking to bring it to market. And unfortunately, that level of expertise is very different than the expertise that you need to actually, successfully bring something to market, but then also, show track record once you get on the market and demonstrate some early commercial success. So yeah, we've seen the bar move there, and I think that's been really challenging for a lot of innovators out there, unfortunately.
I know you've published about the impacts on diagnostics. And what are some things that you've maybe learned from your lessons in quantifying value for payers and providers and your approach there?
Yeah, this is now a requirement for products, right? It's not just we need to run a clinical trial, randomized controlled, and these patient populations to show your clinical efficacy and your safety, but we need to come to market with the economic argument too, right? Budgets are being cut left and right all over the place, so everyone has to think prudently about what they're spending their money on, and that's true for new products as well. And again, just because you have a phenomenal product, it shows great efficacy, shows great data, there are real trade-offs that are unfortunately being made in the market that can be oftentimes dictated by payers based on what they cover and what they don't, but it can also be dictated by physicians who are getting pressure from the top down to be more thoughtful about what they're using with patients, and to be if you're going to use something that's going to be really expensive and hit the bottom line, then it's got to be a really strong clinical argument there. That work is really interesting though. When we do budget impact models, when we do burden of illness calculations, when we do cost effectiveness work, it's all about understanding the clinical benefit that you are getting by delivering this product to a patient and weighing that against all of the economic stuff that happens in the background. And many products that have been really successful have actually been able to show benefit on both, right? Not only are we delivering great care for patients, but by investing in this, by using this product, we're actually saving money in the back end because we are preventing adverse events, or we are pushing off other sequelae longer than was before. So your kind of overall investment in the care of this patient is much lower. In the US, payers do care about budget impact. So again, if I'm, granting access to this product, if I'm going to cover this product, how is that going to impact me from a budget perspective? Sometimes we can show that it actually is cost effectiveness there, right? Cost effective there. By using this product up front, we're preventing some of those longer term complications, which might be more expensive in the back end. In Europe, it's that, but plus. So now you're looking at HEOR data, health, economic, and outcomes research data, where you're including things like absenteeism and presenteeism. Like, is this patient going to be able to go back to work because they're on this medication and on this device? They think about the costs associated with caring for a patient more holistically. They include more things in Europe, just given the way their healthcare systems are set up. But it really is fascinating. It really is fascinating work to put together. Especially in a world where there are more plans, there are more patients that are covered under value-based care type payment settings. In the simplest terms, instead of getting payment for each and every little thing that you do, a payer might reimburse, hey, we're going to give you X dollars for all of the care of this patient. If you can do that in a cost-effective manner, then now you are benefiting from that as a physician. And then from the person who's paying perspective, they're making sure that they're not getting these big outliers and people are upcharging for every little thing. And we've seen some good success there. It's still rolling out in the US, but I think a lot of people are excited about where value-based care is heading, just as we think about the overall budget that we're spending on healthcare each and every year.
Before we go on to the lightning round, I want to ask this last question, which is looking at the trends and changes that are happening in healthcare. What is something that has you the most excited? And then additionally, how do you see your role really evolving and changing around that in the next few years?
I can say excited and terrified about AI in the same sentence. I think some of the companies that are pursuing AI are fascinating. It quite literally will reinvent many industries, completely change them. I think healthcare is absolutely going to be one of those. How deep and broad it goes is a question mark. There are many challenges within healthcare, and where AI is best deployed is again not something that we've got full visibility on quite yet. But that will be interesting. I know that AI is being used to look at aggregate data to help physicians make better decisions on caring for patients, which will weigh everything we've talked about, right? It'll weigh all the clinical data, it'll weigh the economic data, it'll weigh real world evidence on patients. Hey, as I tap into all this data, I can see there have been, hundreds of other patients that have had this exact same presentation, these exact same comorbidities. Some got this treatment in the real data. This was the outcome. Some got these things in the real data, and this is the outcome. And based on all of that, here's your new recommendation. It has the potential to be completely revolutionary. Obviously, a lot of those things still flow through the physician, right? You're arming physician with the information and the data, and they're still making a decision. If something is going to make a decision on its own, it actually has to go through a completely different regulatory pathway, even today, where you actually have to prove that out with evidence. So that's a big one. I think just across the US, we're still seeing shifts in care settings, which is really interesting. So before we were caring for patients in the hospital, and that is quite literally the most expensive place to care for a patient. How can we actually shift that patient to home? Can we do things in home? Can we adequately monitor patients at home so they're not taking up a costly bed? And oh, by the way, we might be able to prevent things like hospital-acquired infections, which we know are completely devastating for so many people in a given year. So there's some really interesting things happening there on shifts in care. We've touched on value-based care models. I think that's another interesting thing that we're seeing. And maybe the one underlying thing that gives me some hope for the future is I think we still are seeing just fantastic innovations across the different sectors of healthcare. New drugs, new diagnostics, new devices, new digital solutions. So it is amazing what people are continuing to develop. We've got a lot of problems we still need to tackle out there. So I don't expect the level of innovation to slow down anytime soon.
Perfect. Now it's time for the lightning round. So my first question for you is, what is the biggest misconception that healthcare startups have when bringing new technologies to market?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit before. I think in the past, it may have just been that evidence is king and that's what you need to shoot for. But now the proof points to support investment are not just clinical, they're more commercial. And we need to think about that, right? We are in a world where those things really matter. Not just because people want to make money, but because you quite literally won't be able to enter markets if you haven't thought about the economics of things and you haven't figured out a way to make your company commercially viable. So I think that is a really big one that we run into often. So the companies that have been successful have incorporated some strategy, either because they come from a consulting background, because they've done it in industry before, or they hire someone like a chief strategy officer early on to help guide that. The people who've brought in market access early has also been really, really successful. I have a market access colleague who clearly is saying this because he believes in it, but he always says that no one ever got fired for bringing in a market access person too early, because again, it's a challenge that every startup eventually has to work through, and those experts are obviously critical to do that. That's probably the big one there.
Well, going on to the next question is, what's maybe the most underrated skill that has been a game changer for you in healthcare consulting? And additionally, how do you think that could maybe apply to other leaders?
Yeah, So the most important thing in consulting, especially healthcare strategy consulting, is strategic thinking. That is not an underrated skill. That is quite literally the skill that you are typically rated on. For me, it's actually been graphics. And I've gotten to a lot of debates on this with people internally, but growing up, I would go to sports camps, many of them alongside my dad, but then my mom would also make me go to art camps, and it sparked so many passions in me. It brings me to the woodworking and building my own things, but also doing painting and all kinds of other things, even to the day, and that's really helped me in making PowerPoint slides. We make PowerPoint slides. That is what we do in consulting, and I am so passionate about having good graphics and conveying a story in a thoughtful and eye-catching manner, and I think it has absolutely led to the success of certain projects. It's led to the success of gaining alignment within an organization. There are times where you literally only have a couple minutes of time with the CEO, and if you have content that is difficult to read, not eye-appealing, the points are lost, right? The graphics aren't working alongside the strategy to really highlight what matters most. You've lost. Like, that entire project could be a failure because you didn't take advantage of that time. So clearly you have to have the good strategic thinking, the good data, but you have to present that in a manner that people are going to respond to, right? Like, we are quite literally trying to help these companies make decisions and gain alignment, and that involves changing perspective, right? That involves getting them to buy into what you are advising. And yeah, I really think that graphics can help at times, for sure.
Going from there, if you could solve one bottleneck in healthcare consulting, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I do think it's pretty amazing still how often people just don't know about healthcare consulting. They don't know about, we've been around for 30 years and people still don't know about us. We even work with clients where we've worked with them for years and years and years and years, but their colleague down the hall has no idea what we can do. So, it's a little bit selfish, right? Like, would love for more people to know who we are and what we do, but it is amazing how many people are in industry and struggling with these challenges and just don't know that there are other resources out there, be it our firm, be it other firms that could help with that. We spend 100% of our time tackling these really complex problems in an industry. You may have never tackled this type of problem before, or you don't have the resources internally to get the right answer. So, I think that is definitely a bottleneck for consulting. I think the big talk in consulting now is how can AI help us be even more efficient with our projects, get to deeper insights, get to faster insights. So I think that is certainly probably coming in some fashion. Obviously hoping that it's more of an augmentation to what we do as opposed to a replacement of what we do. But yeah, those are probably the two big bottlenecks today.
And my last question for you here is, what is maybe another industry that healthcare leaders can use for inspiration to really apply to their work?
Yeah. If you're coming into industry with, and even going into med school with the clinical background, right? I do think it's worth exposing yourself to the economic side of things. Even if you don't want to do that, it's going to be a reality of whatever your job is, unfortunately, right? Even if you are a staunch believer that I am only here for patient care, you can deliver better patient care if you know some of those hurdles that you're going to have to jump through. Right now, you can proactively get ahead of some of those. So there's tons of online courses. HBS has little mini crash courses you could do, which I've done. There's books on strategy and how to think about these things. There's books on healthcare, business, economics, and things like that. So just from an education standpoint, I would absolutely recommend that to everyone. But from an other industry perspective, I'm speaking now from the lens of medtech. I actually go to a conference out in San Francisco every year that touches on the digital side of big medtech industries like orthopedics or cardiovascular care or what have you. And a lot of that business is quite literally shipping instrument sets, implants. They have to be at the right hospital at the right time for the right surgeon for the right patient, right? That is a lot of logistics. And last year they had someone come in and talk about how the automotive industry handles this and tackles the logistics and streamlines the ability to deliver all of the things that you need to in the right place at the right time and do it in a more efficient manner. So that was fascinating to me, right? That you'd never think that would be the core competency of some of these companies, but these big companies are kind of shipping companies too, right? Like they have to do the clinical, they've got fantastic R&D teams, but they also have this massive logistical burden to get their stuff to the right places. And then obviously tech, right? Everything, tech is going to touch everything in healthcare, be it pharmaceutical companies trying to leverage tech to, better monitor and support their patients, to make sure that patients are able to get their drug in a timely manner. Medical devices are becoming ever more connected, right? I mean, look at your watch. The things it can do now is completely different than it could do before. So industry is actively hiring folk that have the tech background and are trying to apply that into healthcare too.
Well, Brandon, thank you very much for your time. What are maybe some final thoughts that you have for the audience based on everything that we discussed today?
Yeah, I mean, I would just push everyone coming out of college to just think about what other things are out there. I think going into medicine is an absolutely noble pursuit, and that is absolutely something you should do if you're passionate about that. But there's other things that are out there, and I didn't know that. Consulting was a great way to see that for me. The other thing I will say now that I've been here for so long is careers are really long, really, really long. So you can reinvent yourself, right? Like we hire physicians. So you can, go do medicine, practice medicine, and then, many physicians experience some of the challenges and realize that the, delivering care and the way that you have to do it today is not exactly what they wanted. And there's other careers out there for you that can be extremely rewarding. So I just think it's, that's just life, right? I don't think there's a right answer to anything. I think, keep an open mind, keep educating yourself in kind of different areas. You don't know what you're going to like and what you're not going to like. So as much as you can expose yourself to new thinkers and new pieces of content is definitely worth it.
Thank you for your time again. Where can people choose to engage and follow you if they choose to do so?
Yeah, please reach out. LinkedIn, obviously, you can follow me there. That's a great place for professional stuff. I tend to put out a lot of content on LinkedIn, especially in the orthopedic space, that has some cool graphics. So if you want to talk about any of that, please reach out. But feel free to shoot me an email as well. Our tickers are just first letter, last name at healthadvances.com. So bwade at healthadvances.com. Looking forward to anyone listening who wants to chat, and thank you again for having me. This was really fun. It's always nice to talk about my story, and hopefully it can help.
Of course. Well, thank you for your time on the K in Clarity podcast.
Awesome. Thanks.